how many times have you given up on your dream at the first sign of adversity? Maybe it's not even a dream. Maybe it's a career path or it's a goal. And of the times that you haven't give up, what allowed you to push through? What was it? What was the differentiating factor there?
Yeah, even if people don't give up, I think it's definitely normal for the want to give up or the thought to give up. And, those that continue to push through are the ones that make it. I think in a lot of the conversations that we've had, and myself included, and the people I know, I think sometimes it comes down to having the support system behind you to keep you going, or having the reason, back to the why of the situation, and believing in yourself, which is definitely hard to do. I think those are big ones.
They are big ones. And that support system and the self-confidence are a couple areas we're going to talk about in today's podcast.
Welcome to Grandpa and the Millennial, the podcast for thought-provoking leadership conversations sparked from real-life leadership journeys. I'm here with Anthony, the Grandpa. I'm Natasha, the Millennial, and our mission is to help you, the professional leader or new entrepreneur, effectively influence, inspire, and develop both yourself and those you lead.
In today's episode, we have a fantastic conversation with Rich Watts, a partner at Peterson Watts Law Group. We're going to talk about adversity and how you overcome adversity and get back on the path of following your dreams or your goals. In addition, we're going to talk about self-belief and the confidence that you have to have in yourself in order to reach any goal. And then one of the most important topics we're going to talk about today is appreciating the moment. Take the time to appreciate the moment. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Grandpa and the Millennial. Rich, tell us your story.
I grew up in Piedmont, California, which is a small town inside of Oakland, completely surrounded by Oakland. One of four kids, the oldest. My basic background is that I grew up in a household full of sports. My dad played college football. My grandpa played college football. And so it was sort of a theme about my life from the time I could remember. I played competitive tennis at the very beginning, and they thought I was maybe going to be something special. And then I figured out it wasn't for me, and they played me. I was 7. They made me play a 10-year-old, and they beat the heck out of me. And I was like, this is not for me. I don't like this game. But what I was good at front, kind of from the day I could walk, was hitting a baseball. And my dad hung a wiffle ball in our garage, and I would sit out there and smash that thing all day long. And the neighbors would go nuts listening to that thing smash on the ceiling. And that sort of became a path that I was on. I wanted to be a football player like my dad, but I was really good at something different. So I went to, of course, grammar school and played sports and did all that stuff. And it was really fun. And we started to recognize at a pretty young age, I think my parents recognized that I was going to be pretty decent at baseball. So they started back then. There wasn't travel ball. There was Little League, and we didn't have one in my town. So they took me out to Moraga, California, and they drove me out to practice. And I played in I played for the Red Sox in Mustang at the Camp Lindo High School. And
so let's go back a little. Let me bring you back just a little bit. So growing up, would you describe your middle class? What kind of were you growing up?
Well, I grew up in a very wealthy town, but my mom didn't work. My dad worked for the phone company. So financially, I look at it back today. I never wanted for anything as a kid, but we didn't have a ton of money. It was a household, our summer vacations were a camping trip or something like that. I grew up with kids going to their mountain house in Aspen, but I had a group of buddies, and we played doorbell ditch and tag, and every night was something in the street. And that's how I grew up.
I can see it. Home when the lights came on, right?
That was the absolute rule. Was we ate dinner as a family every night around 6:30. We sat down, all 4 of the kids and my parents, at our little tiny kitchen table, and my mom made dinner from scratch pretty much every night. It was sort of the old school way to raise your kids.
Yeah.
And that was we definitely. I went to school with kids who were very wealthy. I mean, the Broncos owners' daughters went to my high school. So I saw kids, and I played ball with kids whose dads had Ferraris, and my dad had a '69 Volkswagen Bug. But growing up, I was fortunate enough to have a group of really close friends. There was 3 of us, and we were all from the same sort of financial background, so we never thought twice about not being the wealthy kids. And we shopped at Ross, and we got blems at Mervin's, but it never really bothered me.
Didn't know any different.
Didn't care.
So where were you? Where are you with your siblings?
I'm the oldest of 4. My sister is a couple years behind me, and then my brothers are 6 and 7 years behind us. So I'm the oldest one. I'm the experiment.
You're the experiment. And would you say that it was a strict household?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a household where, my dad worked hard every day. He left at 6 in the morning and came home at 6 at night. And we'd go meet him at the bus stop and walk him back and carry his briefcase. And it was a house. I don't think they had to be strict because I just didn't want to disappoint my parents, and especially my dad. He was just the absolute mentor of my life. It is to this day. And they were strict. We didn't have we had a curfew and we had all those things. But the biggest thing was I just didn't want to disappoint my parents. And so they didn't have to be real strict with us. I had friends that weren't parents that weren't as strict, and we had fun times when we stayed the night at their house. But what my parents didn't hurt them.
And what kind of kid? So you're athletic, you're hanging out with your friends, don't really care about money. What kind of kid were you, would you say? Were you shy, outgoing? Were you curious?
I think I was. I think I was outgoing. We were kind of feral back then. I left in the morning on my bike with a couple bucks in my pocket to get a pizza, bread, and a Pepsi at Convenient Food Mart, and we'd play something all day long. Sometimes we'd go root around in the dumpster at the high school and see what cool things got thrown away, or we jumped off the storage shed into the pole vault mats that we drag out, which was ridiculous and terrifying that we did that. But we just had a really open childhood where we were just kind of free to go do what we did because my parents trusted us a lot and they instilled a lot of values in us early. So
adventurous.
Yeah, we definitely were.
Yeah.
I had a similar background. I can see you reflecting upon it fondly. Like the memories are fond memories. So coming back to baseball, so you finally like baseball. So through your youth prior to high school, was there AAU ball back then? Was there travel ball, or what were you doing there?
No, we played out. I played out in the Little League, the Mustang version of Little League out in Moraga. And then after a year, my dad and a couple other dads created a team to play in that league from our town. And we could barely scrap together 15 kids who wanted to do it back then. There wasn't any kind of travel ball, and you played whatever was in season, but we didn't have Pop Warner. We had a rec league basketball where you got a T-shirt with some company's name on the back and played at the middle school, and that was fantastic. I loved it. I played everything. I played football, basketball, baseball, but it was flag up until high school. We played whatever was in season, pretended to be, whatever our favorite superstar was every day. And it was really just one of those things where growing up, there was nothing else really for us to do. Sports was the thing. It kept us out of trouble. And when we weren't playing organized sports, we were playing at the park. We'd play strikeout, or we would play touch football, or, tackle football out there in our blue jeans. And my mom would get so mad she'd come home all muddy, but that's what we did. It was fun.
It's a different time. The podcast that Tom Tran, I'm sure you know him, we talked to him last, and I said, what's the biggest difference? He's like, kids don't play outside anymore. Yeah. It truly is. So did you excel in just baseball, or were you excelling in all sports leading up to high school?
Football was sort of something that we didn't have. So it wasn't real organized. So it wasn't something I had an opportunity to excel at a young age. Basketball and baseball were the two sports I was pretty decent at. In baseball, I think, at an early age, I was tabbed as someone who was going to be something different. Coaches told my parents that I was special in these things, and I always had a really good arm, and I could hit the ball, and I was left-handed. So there was a lot of upside, I think, they saw in me. And so I had some mentors sort of at the young coaching age who were telling my parents that and telling me I was good at it. But I had a really significant injury when I was 13. And that's a pretty big part of my story, is that I had a spiral fracture with nerve damage in my arm. I was at Babe Ruth tryouts. I'd already made the team the year before. And I was messing around the outfield. We were throwing home as hard as we could, and my arm snapped. And
Oh my goodness.
Where did it snap at?
it snapped my humerus. I had a spiral fracture. It's like I had two elbows. I can still remember to this day exactly how it felt. The
Just
sound
from throwing? Just ripped it and it just...
I had a hollow spot in the bone. It's called a thrower's fracture, and it's very rare. Dave Dravecki from the Giants, so if you remember when he came back from cancer, had his arm break when he was pitching. It's the same concept. His was hollow from cancer. I just had a genetic benign cyst in my humerus, and that's when my life... It was probably the most inspirational moment of my life, and also the most terrifying moment. I mean, they weren't sure I'd ever be able to use my hand again. It was that big of an injury. They had emergency surgery, and my parents were fortunate enough to know people who knew people, and they got the right doctor in, and he did emergency surgery. And 2 years later, I was kind of back to normal. But for 2 years, it was. I mean, I remember the doctor coming in and talking about maybe I'd get the use of my hand again.
Wow. So at 13, you're like, I'm just putting myself in that position. You don't know anything about life. You're just living life. I don't know that we knew what depression was back then, to be honest. Were you down? Was there depression? Would you look back and say, that's what I was like? That's hard at 13.
I think the hardest part was just the concept of doctors sort of looking at my parents. And I wasn't dumb. I could see that my parents were upset, and I could see that the doctors were doubtful about what the recovery might be. My grandfather came in and was talking about how his friend broke his arm and he couldn't bend his elbow, but it made him a better tennis player. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about here? I just broke my arm. I'm going to be fine. But I went through quite a bit of therapy on my arm back then. You know, I didn't know what physical therapy was. And I did that down in Oakland, and, you know, they were doing like shock therapy on my forearm, trying to regenerate the nerve. And I went into my freshman year of high school, you know, with a pretty messed up arm. I had radial nerve palsy, which makes your hand, you can't lift your wrist and your thumb. And I was a quarterback. And it was like everything I'd been up until that very moment was going to be this star athlete like my dad and my grandpa. And I wasn't sure that I was ever going to be a real athlete again. And that was a pretty scary time for a kid.
Were you ever pity on yourself? Were you ever like, why me? Like, what?
I mean, I actually, you know, not a lot of that, because my parents were always just sort of like, you're going to get better. It's going to happen. I went to Stanford quarterback camp before my freshman year of high school, and John Elway was running the thing. And I mean, he actually ran it, you know, it wasn't just his name on it, him and his dad. And my hand didn't really function very well. So I was pretty terrible. And I remember specifically some older kids making fun of the way I threw the ball. And that was probably the only time I was feeling sorry for myself. I was like, man, am I ever going to be normal? I hated the scar on my arm. I mean, I have a big scar on my arm that I was embarrassed to show, but it was kind of like I'd met a couple of people through some friends who were former athletes, and they're like, we have scars too. Let me show you, you know. But that's probably the only time I felt sort of down about it. I always felt like I was going to get better. I had terrible nightmares about it. I mean, I had nightmares that I broke my arm over and over again.
Yeah, I would imagine it's classic PTSD.
We didn't call it that.
Yeah, we didn't call it back then, but that's going through it.
And for me to trust myself, trust my body that I could still throw it as hard as I could. It took about a year for me to trust it. I played freshman football. I was an okay quarterback that year. I mean, freshmen aren't very good anyway, so I kind of got away with it and hit it. But by the time baseball season rolled around, about a year and a half after the injury, I was pretty much back to normal physically. Mentally, I was still afraid to throw the ball as hard as I could because I just didn't want that thing to happen again.
Yeah. How long did it take before that feeling went away? Like you just didn't think about it when you threw a football or baseball?
My sophomore year of high school, I went in and we were playing football, and I never really thought much about my arm throwing a football. But in the wintertime, I was getting ready. I didn't play basketball my sophomore year of high school. I actually dinged up my knee and tore my ACL my sophomore year of high school. So... but I was kind of like, that's just part of it at this point. I was fine. And by the time I got ready, and back then it wasn't the surgery that they do today. It was way different. It was a cast and all this crazy stuff. But I was back by baseball season, and I remember throwing with my friend. I still remember his name, Rusty Robb. We were playing catch, getting ready for tryouts for varsity baseball, and I was just letting it fly.
So you have your arm injury, then you tear your ACL.
Yeah.
So, and you're back. Is this your junior year?
I'm playing sophomore baseball, made varsity, started at shortstop as a sophomore. My high school hadn't really ever had a tremendous amount of great athletes. So, not that I was a great athlete. I was pretty decent though. And sophomore year was a tough year for me because I played terrible in the infield and we had a lousy infield. You got a lot of bad hops, and I wasn't great at shortstop. And I realized that wasn't going to be, my future wasn't going to be on the infield. And so, then I went into high school, played varsity baseball, varsity football, and didn't really have to compete much for that job. It was kind of mine. Had a decent junior year. We won some games, had some big upsets. And then, that baseball season, I had a really good year. And that's when people started talking about professional baseball and
Junior year,
my junior year of baseball.
Did your injuries make you overcompensate? Like, were you working harder to make sure that it wasn't that you weren't behind them, or or even did it give you an appreciation for like, oh man, I know it's like when I can't really can't throw. So did it affect how hard you worked once you were able to get back at it?
Well, it for sure affected me in appreciating the opportunity I had at those moments to play games that I love to play. Because when they take that away from you, especially when you're 13 going to be 14 and you can't do anything that you have been doing your whole life, that everyone's told you this is all you can do. I mean, I got phone calls from people in the town that were sad and calling to console me about the end of my athletic. I was 14.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this that big of a deal? I mean, I don't know.
You wouldn't have known any better if they wouldn't called.
No, I mean, I was just out there to go play and do my thing. And the one thing that, I'm super thankful, and my dad was a huge influence on this, was just like, if you want to do it, you can do it. And not so much that you can be anything you want to be, but you're good at this, you're good at this, put this behind you. This moment's over. It's part of your story. He used to tell me that all the time. This is just part of your story. It's a chapter in your book. And now we're on to the next chapter. So
sounds like Anthony.
Oh yeah, I do say that a lot. So going into your junior year, varsity quarterback?
Varsity quarterback.
So let's pause there. 2 questions I have. One, let's start with this one. Do you have an idea of what you want to do with your future yet? Is sports right in front of you, or is it distant, or do you have an idea?
I think as far as football went, I think I was just playing and being the hometown quarterback. By that time, I knew in baseball that there was a future if I wanted it, and if I wanted to keep working hard at it. I mean, I never stopped wanting to be a professional athlete. Everybody dreams of it, but I'm being told by people that this is a realistic thing for you. I had no idea how hard that road was ultimately going to be. I mean, there were a million major setbacks, but after suffering the arm injury and kind of putting that behind me, I just felt like there wasn't anything that could stop me at that point.
And then the second question is, you're on the baseball team, you're also the quarterback. So you're leading a team as a quarterback. So where does this leadership come from? Were you a good leader when you look back? Would you characterize yourself for that? Were there areas you're like, I might have done this a little bit different? Where did your leadership start?
I think from a young age, being good at baseball, especially, it was sort of leadership by example. I wasn't a vocal leader. I'm not a big believer in sort of the rah-rah leadership. I think you lead through sacrifice and dedication to the cause. And so when I went into my junior year of playing quarterback, one of the big things that they wanted was me to be this vocal leader. And I remember I felt like I was pretending. I was like, this isn't who I am. I lead, and I expected everyone to have the same level of dedication that I had, period. And if you didn't do that, then I'd get on you. But this whole concept of let's have a great day today, boys, and let's pat each other on the back before we went out there wasn't me. And I struggled with that concept that first year because I was balancing between I expect everyone to want this as much as me, and this pretend leadership that I'm being told I should be because I'm the quarterback. And I think as I got through that year, I realized that there's different types of leaders. And that was that changed my perspective on leadership for the rest of my life. And it continues to this day.
Yeah, and we'll jump into it a little bit later. So I want to take us through the end of your high school,
Sure.
and then the opportunities you had in front of you. So how does these opportunities come into play? What's it look like?
And maybe right before the academically. So lots about sports. That's been a focus. Were you good at school?
I wasn't.
No.
And the funny thing was, it wasn't because I wasn't smart. I knew I was smart. I knew I understood things, but I knew that, especially back then, if you were good at sports, you could go to college, and it didn't matter what your grades were. And so my parents, I mean, I didn't do homework in high school ever. I never did it. I just came home, put the books in my room. I'd listen to the A's game and pretend I was studying up there, and I got mediocre grades. And in the subjects I liked, I did really well. I got A's in history. I got A's in civics, and the things that, I knew, I think by high school, that I wasn't going to be a doctor. I barely passed chemistry at a junior college, during my junior year. I was like, this isn't my path. I think maybe I would have been happy doing it, but the math and chemistry side of it wasn't my thing. But I was pretty good at reading, and I was really good at reading comprehension, and I was a pretty decent writer. So my uncle had got me a Harvard law shirt. He went to Harvard, and he brought me home a Harvard law shirt, and I wore it around and just told people I was going to be a lawyer someday. And after I was done playing pro ball.
Wow.
So my academic, up until, and this is kind of crazy, but up until I got to law school, I was never a good student. Never. It wasn't a priority for me. I knew my path was whatever success I'd had in life was going to be through sports.
So incredibly confident in that path. Back to high school, what are your options on the table, and how do they come to fruition?
So this is where it goes crazy. So my junior year, I have a really good year, and I'm going to some of these showcase things. They weren't tournaments like they have now. They were just workouts, and there's scouts there. And then I had a really good senior year of football, and we didn't have summer baseball. So as soon as, baseball season in high school ended, I played basketball out at DVC in the summer league. Yeah. And I practiced football and did 7-on-7 at Laney Junior College and got ready for football season. And I had a pretty good year. And, but I was a late bloomer. I was like 5'11", like 175 pounds, a little small for back then. They wanted every quarterback to be 6'4". But by the end of my senior year, I was getting interest to walk on and play football. And that's what I loved. I was really good at baseball, but man, I love football. It was just my passion. And so I went on some recruiting visits and ended up choosing Arizona State to walk on there. The coaches will tell you what they want to tell you to get you there. And it seemed like a great opportunity, really cool school. And I was going to play in the Pac-10 back then, which won't be anything in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I decided, without even playing my senior year of baseball, that I was going to be a football player in college and not a baseball player.
And dad supporting it, family, everyone's behind you?
Dad's behind it. Professional sports was never really the goal. It was just, in my mind, I thought, well, I could do it. Why not? And I remember asking my dad, I'll never forget it. We had just got a computer. We were the first people to have a computer because my dad worked for AT&T. And I was sitting at the computer. I said, well, do you think I could play both in college? And he said, why not? Why shouldn't you? And he said, what about if I play in the NFL and then become a lawyer? He said, well, Steve Young just did it. And so it was sort of like, he never told me I couldn't, no matter how ridiculous the things I was saying.
He let you dream.
He did. And he supported my dreams even when they were kind of silly. I played high school basketball, had a really fun time. Probably my favorite thing to do in high school because there was zero pressure. I just started on the basketball team, played with Jason Kidd and J.R. Ryder in my league. I was definitely not the best potential basketball player in that league, but I had a hell of a good time doing it and loved it because it wasn't something that I had to play well at. I just loved doing it. Baseball came around. I had another good year. I was, unanimous all league for the second time. I won a batting title and had all kinds of cool things happening, but I was not really getting recruited at that point. I couldn't figure out why. I was getting invited to things like these workouts, but I wasn't getting recruited. And a year after I graduated from high school, my high school baseball coach handed my dad a stack of postcards. And they were all postcards from college recruiters that were trying to get information on me, but he never gave them to me.
Oh, wow. Why?
They'd never had someone who'd been potentially recruitable like this. So they didn't know what to do.
Oh my
How
gosh.
important it was. And today, right, they have Twitter and all these things that kids get recruited. You know, they don't, your high school coach has very little to do with your recruiting today. But I mean, there was postcards from all these schools, and he told people I was playing college football and wasn't interested in playing baseball. So part of that was maybe true, but I still would have liked to have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
But one of the schools that had contacted me was Arizona State, Coach Brock down there. And so I go down there, walk on the football team. You know, I'm getting treated pretty well because I'm a preferred walk on and all that stuff. And one of the guys on the football team said, hey, you know, you played baseball too. Are you going to play in college? And I said, well, I don't know. And I saw Coach Brock in the athletic facility. I said, hey, Coach, you know, any chance you got any room for me on the baseball team? And back then they had JV baseballs before Title IX. And he said, yeah, come on out. You can play catcher? I said, sure. I hadn't really caught. I caught when I was in Babe Ruth a couple of games for maybe half a season. And within 2 weeks, I was the starting catcher on the JV baseball team at Arizona State with almost no skills, but I was willing to try it. Had a really good year for them, but I was still a varsity football player. So when spring football came out, I told Coach Brock, I said, look, Coach, I either got to play varsity baseball, you got to bring me up, or I got to go back out to varsity football. And that was the ultimatum I'd sort of received from the coaching staff.
Oh, I have to ask you here. Yeah. So do you realize at this time that you're living every guy's dream, right? You're playing varsity football, you're playing walking onto the baseball.
Yeah,
like, do you realize it at the time, how special it is?
No, you know, I don't think I did. I think I when I walked into that locker room for the football team, I mean, it was pretty special. I knew it was cool. I mean, I knew it was cool that, you know, my dad had told me, and he'd played at San Jose State and then went to camp with the Atlanta Falcons. He said, you're going to walk into the locker room and everybody in that room is the best player in their town. They're the best player in their league and some are the best player in their state. I did feel honored to be in that room with those guys. And our baseball team was number one in the country back then. I'm playing with JV games. You know, the varsity guys would work out and get extra work with us. I mean, Mike Kelly, who's the number one baseball player in the country, is playing center field while I'm catching. So, I mean, I guess I knew that it was pretty cool, but I felt a lot of pressure to make one of them work because I wanted one to work so bad. And at that time, it's not going, football's fine. It's not going awesome. I got bigger though. And that was the thing that happened my freshman year. I went from 5'11", 180 to 6'2", 225 in 5 months. You know, weight training and growth. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm this entirely different human being. But I'm still left-handed and I still have a good arm. And I was learning how to play catcher, but I still wasn't very good at it. But I could hit. And I hit a lot of home runs in that JV team. And Coach Brock told me, if you go back out to the football team, you're never playing baseball at Arizona State. And I went, wow, this is how it's going to end. I mean, this is how it's going to end. And this is one of those moments in your life where I think when you through adversity, you have to seize opportunity. And I was walking off that field for my very last JV baseball game, night game. And a scout from the Montreal Expos came up to me and said, hey, you know, wanted my information. I said, well, it's nice to meet you, but this is my last baseball game. I got to go back out to football. And he said, transfer to junior college. We'll draft you next year.
Oh, wow.
And now I'm going, wow, I'm legitimately going to be a professional baseball player if I want to choose this path. So my parents and I talked it over. I went back out, played spring football. They had moved me to linebacker. So I'm no longer a quarterback. I'm not really doing what I want to do. I realized I was going to be a punt coverage guy. I mean, it wasn't a future for me in that sport, but maybe I could play professional baseball. So
the dream's got to be in the back of your head every day.
And now it's really there because I'm told by someone who's an actual scout that this is a legit path and we would draft you. So I talked to my parents and we made a difficult decision. I talked to the head football coach at Arizona State. His name was Larry Marmee, and just an outstanding human being, and treated me like not just a player, not just a piece of the equipment. He treated me like he would treat his own son. And we had a really good conversation. He said, look, you know, put the feelers out there, see if you can find some place to play, but you're welcome to come back. And the only place that I didn't have to sit out at and I could play both sports was UC Davis. And that was the only place I came back on. I went on 5 recruiting visits and I came home and told my parents, I will never go there.
Oh,
I'll never go to UC Davis. And August of 1991, I'm loading up my very old Mazda 626 and I'm driving to go play both sports at Davis. And it's the craziest thing. I mean, I remember, and this is another crazy thing. I'm getting in Emeryville, I'm getting onto the freeway to come to Davis, and center field comes on the radio. And that was my position in high school. And I'm thinking, maybe this is destiny. Maybe this is the right thing. So I go to Davis. start playing football. I'm going to play both. I've talked to the coaches. It's going to be cool. And I sort of was like, this is such a big step down for me in football. I just didn't, I was maybe a little arrogant because I'd come from such a big place with this huge stadium with 80,000 people. And they were practicing in a park, pretty much next to the stadium in Davis. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me. I got to think about this. So my parents were moving from Piedmont back to New Jersey. So I went to help them move. And the coach said, look, come back when you're ready. And I came back and said, Coach, I appreciate it, but I'm just going to focus on baseball. And that was the end of my football dreams and career. But I was kind of like more focused on being a professional athlete at that point than staying in the game I loved the most. But it was cool. I knew where I was going. I knew I had an opportunity.
And so does your work ethic change now that you're focused on one? Like, because you were split. So does now it's like, okay, this is the dream. I'm going to chase it with everything I got.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did. I was really not a very good catcher. I knew I needed a lot of work there because I had really not done it at a high level. I didn't know how to call a game. I didn't know how to manage that kind of level of pitching. And I was fortunate when I got to Davis that they had a catching coach only that year. He was only there that first year I was there, who was a really good catching coach. And he taught me, he kind of pulled me aside and said, look, you can do this. And this can be something really special. So his name was Alan Peel, and Alan and I, Coach Peel and I spent tons of time in the batting cages where he was just firing balls at me out of the pitching machine and learning how to frame pitches and be a receiver and do all those things. And then they redshirted me. And I'm like, I came to this school so I didn't have to sit out. And I hadn't even started practicing yet. And they tell me they're going to redshirt me. I am at a place I don't want to be. I'm, playing only one sport, and I'm not even going to play this year. And part of it was some academic difficulty I had with the UC Davis curriculum. It's a lot harder than Arizona State. Arizona State's application back then was front and back. And, Davis had an essay. So I knew I was in trouble early. But I didn't, at that point, I kind of was like, this is something that, I know I'm good at this by this point. I know I'm getting better at being a catcher. I still have a good arm. I can still hit the baseball. And they had a senior who was going to play. So they were actually doing me a favor. I didn't know it at the time.
You didn't know it at the time. But.
No, it felt terrible, and it felt like an insult, to be honest with you. I'm coming from a place where, my JV team would have mopped up those guys at Davis, and 5 of us off that JV team of 8 kids, 8 freshmen, got drafted later. And so I knew I was pretty good at it. And so I came back the next year and had a really good fall, and I met a girl, and made my life happier and ended up marrying her. But I start out the season and I don't start the first game. And I'm like, this is like the craziest thing in the world. How am I not starting? And I go down to the first series and I don't play. We go down to Riverside. I don't play one. I caught 1/2 inning, and I'm like, this can't be happening right now. Yeah. I'm still at UC Davis. I'm not even playing. And I think I'm better than these guys. And we came back. We played Sac State. I got to pinch hit with bases loaded and hit one off the wall for 3 RBIs. And I never sat the rest of my career.
It's like a movie. Music played, and
it was funny because I hit the ball, and I was one of the things that is a motivating factor for me, and pretty much everything I do is don't doubt me. If you doubt me, that just pushes me harder. Don't make me mad. I love the Incredible Hulk when he says, you don't want to see me when I'm angry, because that was like, you just don't. Make me mad. I'm going to play harder. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to work harder than anybody else. And if you do that and you have talent, then you're going to be better than other people. And then, I got that sophomore year, it was all region. We had a pretty good run. We were 2 in the country. My junior year, I played summer ball, and I knew I was going to get drafted if I had a decent year. Had a good year in the summer league in New Jersey, and came back. And at this point, my wife, Tina, who was, I'll never forget this. This is a pretty funny story. I'm sitting there with my roommate, who's a pitcher, and Tina had just got all conference she got second team her junior year. Playing basketball. We met in the training room. My bad knees and her bad back got me married. Lori Bjornson, hometown girl, happened to be playing at the same school. She was playing basketball at Davis. I walked in the training room. She said, Richie Watts. And I'm like, oh my God, Lori, what's up? She said, I want you to meet my friend Tina. And That was 31 years ago. So,
Wow.
but he says to me, you know, Tina just got second team all league. You know, I hadn't even played yet. He says, you better have a good year because you can't have your girl be all league and you're not.
Yeah.
So I had a good year, won a batting title my sophomore year, and then won another one my junior year. Worked out for a bunch of teams. My worst workout was for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they ended up drafting me in the 11th round, and I took off, left school early, and had a tough negotiation. I learned real quick about what the business of pro sports was. You know, Ilford, Iowa, Sacramento. I'm 21 years old. First meeting out there, I ordered a cheeseburger because, you know, when I went out as a kid, you know, we ordered the cheap things on the meal. There was things on the menu that we weren't allowed to get when I was a kid because we just couldn't afford it. And the second time I went back to them, I will have a filet mignon.
Good for you.
2 beers. You know. But my career was relatively short. I got dinged up a little bit. I tore my knee up again, tore my other knee up pretty bad in spring training. Had to have a shoulder surgery. And then I realized, oh my God, this baseball thing's not going to happen. And I'm done.
Forever.
And how old are you at this time?
22.
22.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
engaged. I'm 22 years old. And I don't even have my degree. I'm like, what am I going to do? And
So question for you before we move from sports, but one of the things with athletes, the comparison, you know, stacking yourself up against these people, like you said, a really important thing, which is kind of obvious. All these kids are like the best from where they come from. So that comparison, or when you have to sit out and somebody else gets that, what was that like? You know, you just knew or thought you were better than them, or did that really like bother you? Or what was that comparison like?
I think the thing for me was, and this is something that I don't know if it's always a good trait, but I have an incredible belief in myself. And I felt like I just knew in my heart that I was better. I knew physically I was better than them. I was bigger. I was faster. I had a better arm. I hit the ball better than those guys. And I just didn't realize that there was going to be politics that you got to get through. Even in college, they exist. And from the time I was a kid, I always felt like whatever I did, I was going to be the best at it. I probably wasn't. I'm sure I wasn't. There's lots of better kids, but I felt like it was. And I felt like nothing could stop me as long as I believed in myself. And I had a dad and mom who supported me and who were like, you know, go for it. Don't be second best. And before I got drafted, I ended up being All-American and had a good year. And then I went to play and then the realities of some physical stuff. The first time in my life I went, oh man, I mean, my arm was really messed up. And then I didn't even tell them because you can't say anything. You can't say anything. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty hurt my first year in the minors. And then my second year in spring training, I popped my knee on my right knee, which was not my ACL knee, and tore my meniscus really bad and had surgery. And then I went in to talk about my shoulder and I'm like, I'm going to go rehab and get surgery at home. I was trying to get released. My agent was saying, we can get you over to the A's. The Pirates are a terrible organization. We'll get you to the A's. We can get you to the A's. And it didn't work out. So it's 1996. I'm getting married in June and I don't have much of a future. I know I have money to go finish my degree, got some signing bonus money so I can pay for college, and went and got my degree at Davis. And I was like, now what? You know,
What was your degree?
I got a degree in communications because it was the one they told me was the easiest.
So you get your degree in communications.
Yep.
And then where are you at in life? What are your thoughts? Are you married yet?
We got married in June of 1996. I walked through graduation with my wife and her family. My parents had, you know, kids at home that couldn't come out, and the job market was terrible, and there was just nothing out there. And so we worked at Hewlett Packard as contract employees, and just to pay the bills. I mean, we were grown-ups. We weren't getting supported. We had to grow up and start being, you know, we got married at 22. I turned 23 right after that. My wife turned 23 in October, so we were young, and we had supportive parents though who were just going to, you know, we knew that if all heck broke loose, we could still have someone who helped us. We could go live at home, you know, not the plan, but we could. And I worked at Hewlett Packard for about 6 months and worked for a terrible boss. I actually put together, I'm like, this is the most inefficient system. I was selling support contracts for hardware, and I don't say the guy's name, but I came to him and I said, look, we gotta change this system. We have 6 people answer this 800 line, but I'm selling like 10 times as much as the rest of the people in my group because competitive, right? They put it on the wall, how much you sold, it was a big deal, quotas and all this. So why don't we streamline this? 4 people answer the phone, and then 2 people can do the sales quotes and follow through, and then the other people can be backup. And so he said, that'll never work. And then we talked over a few more times. So I think that'll work. Well, we had cubicles back then, right? I don't know if we still do now. And I hear him over the wall telling his boss that he's created a new process to work with support quotes.
Oh, that's your idea.
It's my idea. And he doesn't say a word about who came up with it or anything. I told my wife, I said, I'm done here. I'm not working here. I'm going to go work in real estate with your dad. He didn't want me to, but I knew there's a lot of money in it. And so like 6 months after I took that job, I packed up my stuff, took the broker's test, and became a real estate salesperson with a desk and a phone book. And it didn't go well. The market was bad.
Why didn't he want you to? Because of the market, or you were his son-in-law?
I think because he knew that it's a tough job and its ups and downs are pretty bad. And it was a bad market. There was not a lot of deals being made back then. And he didn't know how to be a mentor. And so I went to, I finally got I got a small deal, and I made a little bit of money. And then I had a deal in the Bay Area. My buddy was a broker in the Bay Area, and he said, we have this need. What I did back then, there was no internet. So I went down, well, not like it is today. I went down to the state, and they used to post their needs on a bulletin board. And so I would write them down, and I would call brokers and tell them I got this space and this is what it is. Anybody could have seen those things because they were there if you went down to the state, but they weren't on the internet. So you had to go physically and look at the board. So I'm making this deal, and it's a big deal. It's going to make me a lot of money, more money than I'd made in a couple of years. This broker tells me I figured out who, not my buddy, he'd referred me to somebody else. I figured out who your client is, and I'm going to go around you because you can't represent the state of California. It's true. They don't give exclusives for it. So he goes, I said, that's unethical and it's probably illegal. And he said, well, get a lawyer then. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I was 24 years old. I was in an office with zero financial support from anybody else. So I went to Borders Books. I bought I bought an LSAT test prep book with a computer drive. And I decided at that moment, I'm going to finally go to law school. Oh. So I took the LSAT, did very well. It was, frankly, I thought it was pretty easy. Got into McGeorge School of Law, borrowed some money, which was terrifying, but got some scholarships because I did so well in the LSAT. And my wife was getting her MBA while working she had been hired on by Hewlett Packard. And so we were passing ships for like a year. I mean, I would put on a pot of coffee at 6 o'clock at night, and I would make her dinner, and she'd come home from her MBA class. We'd watch an hour and a half of TV, and then I'd start drinking that pot of coffee and study all night. And I did really well in law school. First time in my life, because I wasn't playing a sport. I could just focus, dedicate all my efforts, all that time and energy I was spending on sports and the time, that dedication to a goal. And it's still competition, right? They rank the class. I wanted to be in the top 10%. I wanted to be up there. So I crushed it. And I would study till 5 a.m. I'd wake her up. She had to go to work at 5:30, and I would sleep for a few hours, and I'd go to school. And then I would come back, and we'd do that every day.
The grind.
We did it for a year.
Absolutely. And no kids at this time.
No kids. Nope. No kids. We both had our goals. We're in a little rental duplex out in Carmichael, and times were tight. I remember one time we had to buy groceries on our credit card. Safeway started taking credit cards, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting milk. It was a sacrifice. And, we didn't want to ask our parents because we got married early, and, I had my big fat Greek wedding. My wife's Greek, and that's a whole nother crazy story. But, we didn't want to look like we weren't good enough to do this or ready to do this. So we got through it, and I did well in law school, and I got hired by kind of the top firm in town. It was called McDonough, Holland & Allen. They don't exist anymore, so feel free to say their name. But they were offering, at that point, by my third year of law school, and Tina had finished her MBA, she was pregnant, and she had just got pregnant. And so now I had the real pressure. I had to support a family and had a, we didn't know it, but I had a son on the way at the time. By the time graduation came around, I was the class speaker, and I spoke in front of the whole full memorial auditorium, and then took the bar exam, and I'd clerked at the McDonough, Holland & Allen while I was waiting to go work there. And I started working as a lawyer as I was about 30 by that point. And we had a kid born in October that year, and I'd passed the bar, and I got my first lesson on poor leadership, I think. through that experience at that law firm. I mean, I'd seen some bad coaches. Everybody has those,
Yeah.
you know, who's how not to coach. And I played for Mike Martz, who's famously a notorious kind of a jerk as a coach at Arizona State. He was my offensive coordinator. And so I'd seen some of it, but I saw inefficiency for the first time, real, true inefficiency. I had a really good supervisor who had put me into, he's now my business partner, who put me into some really tough projects right away because he thought I could handle it and just kind of threw me into the fire. And then the firm was so big, I get reviewed by two people I barely know. I only know them by their faces. And they're telling me all the things I don't do well. And I'd been approached by a guy who said, hey, come work for me right out of law school. Come work for me as in-house counsel for my construction company. And I'm like, I'm not ready yet. I need experience. And we had this review, and I'm sitting there listening to these two morons give me this review. I'm like, it's this total group thing, just the worst of the worst leadership stuff. But all the things were negative, and they gave me this lousy bonus. And my friend who was in a different department got 4 times my bonus and had done nothing, but she had a better kind of network above her. And I closed the door, I picked up the phone, I called my buddy Bill, and I said, hey, I'll take that job. I was there a total of about 1.5 years as a lawyer there, and including my clerk time. And I went in-house counsel and did that for a year with a construction company. We were laying people off. We were going public. So we had to go through the company and kind of get rid of the fat. And, you know, I remember showing up in San Diego at the headquarters, and we walked into this warehouse and guys were playing wiffle ball. And I'm like, oh man, you guys are all
You're
gone.
on the list. You're
all
on the
gone.
list.
You know, if we have people that can play wiffle ball during working hours, then you're gone. And one day I realized, I think I would lay me off next because I was expensive. And so I approached them. And again, you know, one of those adverse moments where you see opportunity, I said, listen, why don't I become your virtual in-house counsel? I'm going to start my own firm. I'm going to get a couple of clients, just me and maybe my former partner, we'll do this together, and we'll just get 4 or 5 clients and have a nice life. And that'll be that. And then that morphed into a full-blown law firm. And that was 18 years ago.
And that's where you're at now.
Yours?
That's where I'm still there.
Wow.
So your self-confidence is incredible. So as I think through the story, the support system is what stands out. Do you attribute a lot to that? Or
I think definitely knowing that no matter what happened in my life, I had people that would still care about me and believe in me. I have great parents. My in-laws are fantastic. So I knew that, you know, it wasn't necessarily financial support, but it was emotional support. Mm-hmm. And I knew no matter what happened that there's, you know, I really I'd had a lot in that up till till the day I left that firm. I'd had a lot of moments in my life where pretty catastrophic things had happened to my path. But, you know, just because I didn't have a choice not to be successful in that path. I had a wife. I had a kid on the way. I had to make this work.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I say self-confident, like, there's people that want to start businesses and they stay in the 9 to 5 and, you know, they'll retire and they'll have a good life, but they never take that step because they don't have the self-confidence. It's always the what if this doesn't work. So how did you, just because you wanted it and to will it doesn't mean it was going to work. How did you get there?
Well, I think, you know, you're right. Wanting it's not enough. But from my athletic background, I'd known that if you work hard, and I don't mean work hard when you're supposed to be there. I mean, work hard all the time. It's mental preparation at home. It's extra work. It's showing up early. It's staying late. It's doing all those things. I know those are all cliches, but there's cliches because they work. Mm-hmm. And I was, again, didn't have a lot of choice. I had to make it work, but I knew the path because I've been raised in this environment of sports. I've read a lot since then about sort of the Navy SEAL mentality and, you know, adversity, you know, iron sharpens iron and all those things. But, you know, there's one of their mottos is the only easy day was yesterday. You know, that's one of the things I love because that's the truth. And I think that was my mentality. And unfortunately, I will say this, and this is a qualification to all my sports. I didn't enjoy it as much when I played it as I enjoy talking about it now.
I think we're all better 25 years ago.
It's not that I don't look back on the talent. I just look back and I remember all the good times.
The times were better. Yeah. Like we forget all of like the hard days, or it was like, it was a great Friday night. That's all you remember.
Yeah. And you know, raising two athletes. Both my kids are D1 athletes. Both my kids have had plenty of adversity with COVID and all the other stuff. I'm seeing it now, and I'm trying to remind them to try to enjoy these moments, the good things. The bad things, you gotta live them because they make you better. But you got to try to appreciate the moments that are good when you can. I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah. And these conversations always take us in interesting places. So aside from leadership, just talking about life lessons, because you had a lot of adversity coming up. You're incredibly successful. Family's incredibly successful. You've talked about some of those attributes, but what are some of the advices, if you were going to give a couple of principles, aside from the cliches, but that you would say, this is something that you have to follow or you should follow, and you will, whether it's over a 1 year, 5 year, it'll pay off. It may not today, but what are some of those attributes and going through adversity and getting to where you're at?
I think, one of the principles that, because I had to was like I said earlier, seizing opportunity out of adversity. Just because something's bad at the moment doesn't mean it's not going to give you the greatest gift downstream. And if you can get through it, and we can get through a lot, and we can get through a lot more than we think we can. At the moment, you're like, this is devastating. I can't get through this. But then if you just do, you get up and you just keep trying, and you get up and you do it tomorrow, it just sort of seems to work itself out. But it doesn't work itself out if you're a quitter. I mean, my dad, when I was a kid, we just weren't allowed to quit anything. You could stop doing something, but not in the middle of it. If you were on a team, you're on that team. You made a commitment to those people. And so I made a commitment to my teammates in college to do well. I made a commitment to my coaches to do well. I made a commitment to my wife that I was going to be successful. We borrowed a lot of money for me to go to law school. I couldn't make that a waste. And so it was sort of like when things happen, you just have to grind through them, because once they're in your rearview mirror, they just sort of fall away. And the benefits of those, when those adverse moments come, and they will, and they do, and they still continue to, you just have to say, okay, I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to rally through it. I'm going to look at what I can do to make this situation better or not make it happen again. And that's been my focus in everything I've done since I broke my arm, to be honest with you.
And so how often do you find yourself where you're in that storm, whether it's work or it's personal? And what's your process? Is this always top of mind? This is a season. This is a chapter. Grind through this. Or there's sometimes you have to say, I'm pissed right now, or I'm upset right now. Let me take an hour and get back to my roots and then do it. Because how do you deal? What's your process?
I think, my process is, I think one thing is I'll take a step back for a minute. Like you said, take a step back and just say, okay, that happened. Now, so what are the things we can do, we as a team can do to make this not happen again, to fix the problem we're already in? And then it's back to work. I think you do have to take a moment to just let yourself grieve this adversity. I think you have to. You have to acknowledge it exists, because if you don't, you're not going to do the right things to fix it. But you sort of take a moment, have your grieving moment, start your plan, implement your plan, and then just be relentless in the pursuit of that plan. That is basically what I've done. I mean, I talk about it all the time. Drive is the number one attribute to me in life is drive. If you're driven, no matter what, you may not be successful at the thing you're doing that moment, but it will lead to success at the end of the day. And I don't mean financial success. I think financial success is just one of the many aspects of success. I think it's the least important of them. But I think achieving a goal, when you get there, gosh, it feels good.
Yeah. And we're aligned. Like, take a step, and that step is in a direction, but you may end up going a completely different direction that you had no idea. But until you do that, you're just frozen. And you're stuck. So I want to touch on your kids. Kids are incredibly successful. So what advice do you, I know all of this advice I would assume you give to them, but what have you shared with them over the years, and how do you communicate that advice? Because it's different when we're sitting here talking about it, and then talking to a 10-year-old, to a 15-year-old, to an 18-year-old, to a 20-year-old, and they're different stages of life. What's your style? How does that work?
I think one of the unique things is, because of some of the things that I went through as a kid, and then in college, and then in law school, and then growing up, and even in this job I have now, this company we run, is that I have a lot of life experience. And I think if you can help someone understand, I've been through something like this, it's okay. It sucks. Let's get through it. And this is what I did. And it doesn't always, like you said, it doesn't mean because you change your path, you're on that path for life. Sometimes you're going to take 5 or 6 rights and a couple lefts, and you might end up back on that path, or you might end up on a completely different path. But I think the way with my kids, one thing I've always done with them that my parents did with me and my in-laws did with me is to show them that we love them no matter what happens, no matter where these paths end up. We love them. We're going to support them. And at the end of the day, your book is your book. It's not mine. And we all have our own. And as much as we want to write the ending, you got to go write the whole book before you can write the ending.
Yeah, it's incredible. Our kids are the same age. So, and I have one older, she's 30, but I go through the same thing, right? I look at them and you want to influence as much as you can, but you want to help them get through. But they have to have some of those bad chapters, and all you can do is be there knowing. And on the outside, it's easy for us as we look and say, oh, they're going to get through this chapter. This isn't the end of the world, while they're in some storm or something. And they come through it.
Absolutely. And I think, if they don't, I don't think that people that are truly successful in life, and I use that almost with air quotes, I hate air quotes, but I think truly successful people if they haven't faced adversity, I don't think they can appreciate it. We all know the silver spoon kid who just had it given to them. And I don't even respect those people as much as I respect someone who started at the bottom and maybe got knocked down a few times, but kept getting up. And that's the key to me, is I think that's the most fantastic human being in the world, is someone who can just keep getting knocked down and getting back up.
Absolutely. I'll share, Donovan and Jonathan, we've had recent conversations, and I told them, I was like, take this time to fail. I was like, fail 5 times. I was like, you're 22, you're 25. I was like, fail right now. I was like, it's a lot easier at this age than it is at 40 or 45. So go figure out what you want to try and try it.
No doubt.
So the hour goes by fast. So we have some staple questions.
Yeah. Staple questions. I'll go first. In a little bit, there's always, when somebody has kids, some of the advice spills over. But the question that I always ask is, for you personally, if you were to talk to your 30-year-old self, looking back, or knowing what you know now, being who you are now, what advice would you give the 30-year-old Rich?
That's a good question. What's funny? I'm not sure. You talk about this all the time, but one of the things that in life is that you get to this moment because of all the things that happened to you to get there. And I can truly say that I wouldn't change anything. So I would tell that guy, keep grinding. You're on the right path, and just remember that, you're doing this for the greater cause. Now I have kids, and, I had a son on the way at that point, or he was probably born. But no matter what you do, just keep friggin' going. That's what I tell myself.
I do too. So I have a couple. We've talked about success a lot. And Danny, he brought this question up on his podcast. So how do you define success?
Oh, so it's funny because someone asked me the other day who I thought I was. And I said, well, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm hanging on desperately to an athlete. I want to be a great friend to my friends, and I want to help my community. I love coaching all these kids in this community. It's been the most pleasurable thing I've done as an adult. And he said, well, but you didn't say, business owner or lawyer. I said, because it's not in my top 5. I think a successful person is someone who, at the end of the day, can go to bed knowing that whatever I did it as well as I can. And I didn't just do it for myself. And the success is seeing the people around you thrive, and the people above you and below you thrive, right? You want my clients to be successful, but I want my employees to be successful. I've already done my thing. I want my kids to just blow me out of the water. I want them to do everything better than me, And so I define success as someone who can look back and say, yeah, I didn't do everything right, but I stayed on the right path.
So now I'm going to take it back to Natasha's question. While you wouldn't change your path, did you define success that way at 30?
No, it's funny. That's probably a good question. I think at 30, because I was, interviewing with some of these big law firms, and I had much bigger offers than I had from the firm I ultimately chose to go to, but they were a family style firm, which sort of true. But
thought?
I think at the end of the day, I think at 30, I thought financial success was success. And I definitely at 51 don't look at financial success. Things don't make you happy. They might for a minute, but you get out of that car and you go back in your house full of your family, and are they happy? Do they have what they need? Are you able to give them the time and the love? I saw you at a lot of games. We didn't miss many.
Yeah.
I sacrificed a lot of money to go to those things and clients and experiences, but it was worth every second of it.
And it's why I asked the question as we talk about the grandpa and the millennial perspective, because when I was 30, I thought the same thing. But then as you get older, you get our age, and you start to realize, you start looking at the clock a little bit, like, what? I'd rather have dinner with my kids than go and hang out at some social event. Or I'd rather be with my family. Like, the clock is ticking, and that is what success is. Those things, to your point. But at 30, it was a little bit different perspective. How do you define it at 30? I don't think I've asked you that.
Well, I think you did on my pod, but for me, it's a little. I don't have kids. I'm 30. I don't have kids. It's for me, work is my career is definitely a priority. So I think I'm just hustling right now, so that I can get to the point. If I do it now, right, then I can choose what I want to do later. So I think right now it's working hard, and that's not to say that I don't still want the people around me to be, taken care of and happy and all that. And it's happening. It's just happening at the same time. So I think just trying to balance both. Like, I don't want to get later on and look back and think I missed something. So just trying to get as much in as I can.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that that you brought up just now, and it was advice I got early on, or before I had kids, right when we got married, was, appreciate every one of these moments, because they go fast. And, I feel like it was yesterday, we drove from Sutter Memorial Hospital with our peanut-sized son, because he was 5 weeks early, and barely could go in a car seat. My wife was yelling at me, go slower. I'm 10 miles an hour. But I think that the advice I got back then was to treasure these little moments. And I didn't miss much. I didn't do golf trips with the guys. I didn't, go out drinking. I would rather sit and watch a movie with my kids and be out with the boys. And to this day, I'm still that way. I'm not going to miss a thing because it goes fast. And, my dad kind of influenced me with that. He as hard as it was for him, he made everything. He made everything. It was just, even if he pulled up in his bug behind the outfield fence and was still in his suit, I saw him out there watching. And so I think that's the thing, is to appreciate the time. Like, gosh, my 30-year-old me knew it, but I would want to remind him how important that you can't get it back.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. Right now, I think I'm in the phase or not a phase, but the understanding that you don't really know that it's a moment until it was. Like, that was a moment, but in it, you're, so I'm trying to be very aware, but it's easier said than done.
You got to live in it.
Got to be present. Yeah.
You got to be present. You got to live in it.
Okay. So this goes along with that question. I asked this question of everybody. So if you could talk to any one person, alive, dead, historian, anybody, one conversation, who would it be and why?
It's a good one. Man. Well, I had a coach who had a moment in my life, just a moment in high school. He was just a volunteer. He came out and talked to us a couple of times, Coach Ramirez, and he was very old. He was wise, right? He was a wise man. He was the Yoda of baseball for our community. And we sat down one time and he gave me a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. I'll never forget this moment. We sat down in the bullpen and he talked about all these core principles. And at the time I was sort of like, man, I have to do my 30 minutes with Coach Ramirez. I still have the book. I still have it. He underlined sections for it in me. And, he was a very faithful man, and a lot of it was centered around faith. But the main point he was making to me was just never give up in anything, whether your faith gets you through it, your family gets you through it, just never give up. And the batting cage at the high school is named after him, but he passed away when I was playing college. He didn't get to see where I ended up, which is a bummer, because I would love to go back in time for a moment with him, just to tell him, hey, Coach, I did it.
Yeah. Oh, that's special.
That'd be a good
cool.
call. Yeah.
Really, really good one.
Yeah, that'd be my guy.
Okay, one more question. Not necessarily a staple, but I'm just curious. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in business?
Well, I know you talk a lot about leadership. I think the biggest lesson I learned in business was how I think people want to be led. And I think leaders who try to rule with an iron fist and discipline and those things, I never responded well to those people. I think if someone makes a mistake, the first time that happens, we all make them. Second time, I might not be so lenient, but the first time, maybe even second time, I want to truly appreciate that they understand they've made a mistake and help them get through it. Mm. And I think that's been sort of the thing that I've managed employees for 18 years and my clients they're some sort of their employees are my employees. And a lot of times they come to me because they've made a mistake. And I think sympathy and empathy are probably some of the most important traits that anyone can have in business, because whether you're selling something to someone who can't afford it and they really want it, but they can't afford it, or you're trying to help them solve a problem that they shouldn't have done or shouldn't have made. If you're sympathetic and empathetic, that, yeah, I know you're in this spot you don't want to be in. Because when everybody's successful, it's easy, right? They got all the money in the world and you sell them with whatever, no big deal. Success is easy. It's helping people get through. And that's literally my job, is to help people get through adversity. And now I do a lot more transactional work, and it's still adverse, right? We're trying to make money to pay off bills and debts and loans, et cetera. And it's just helping get through those challenges in life. Like that is the thing that I feel that whenever we're successful in what we do at my firm or what I do as a professional, it's to help someone get to a place that's better than they're at when they walked in the door.
Yeah, when they win.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. There's a couple of things that we talk about, and I know we're over, but I'm going to spend a minute talking about it. When someone comes to you and they made a mistake and you take that approach, like you build trust and rapport so they can come back to you. If you go the other route and they're scared, they're never going to be honest with you again. You'll never get the best out of that human being if they're afraid because they made a mistake. So I appreciate that. I really, really appreciate the going that way. And then we talk a lot, Natasha and I do, and the people that we work with. I make the person that we were with that day better than when they came to us. Make them a better professional. Yeah. And if we can do that in sales and leadership, then we've done our job for the day and we can hang our hat. So I can just relate and appreciate it.
Can't agree more. If you leave every day making somebody better or yourself better, I don't think there's any better achievement.
Yeah, and that's why we do this. So this has been an incredible conversation. I think you're going to do that with everyone that gets to listen. I think it's been fantastic.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming into the
appreciate you guys
studio. Appreciate it.
Still need inspiration. Yes. So we always ask our guests who or what inspires them, or is there inspiration? So who or what would you say?
So my inspiration is 100% my father. In everything I've ever done, and at least to now. And I think now I hope I inspire him because I followed in his path, and now I'm inspired by my family. They are the most important thing to me in the world, and I'm inspired by everything they do.
That's so awesome. It's a good way to look at it too, as he's your inspiration and you want him to be inspired. So, and I can tell that your kids inspire you. So that's really 100%. Awesome. It's awesome.
Incredible family.
Oh, thank you so much.
Incredible.
I'm so proud of them.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. We always hope to I get something out of every single episode, but we hope to get things out for our listeners. So there were so many really good points today, I think, both personally and professionally, that people will take. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing.
I appreciate it. I think that was like a nice therapy session.
That's what we try to do here at G&M,
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will wrap us up. Gramps, Millennial, and Rich out.